with Dr. Catherine Bromley, who's the Deputy Director, Data Strategy and Infrastructure, ESRC, who's going to talk about strategic developments in the data infrastructure landscape in the economic and social sciences and beyond. Thank you, Catherine.
Thank you, Nicola. I'll start by checking, can everyone hear me?
And we are recording it.
And you're good. I'm notoriously quietly spoken. This is actually the first in-person event I've spoken at since February 2020. The first time I've done so in my capacity at ESRC. And also, I suppose I joined in April 2020, so had the conference gone ahead, then I probably wouldn't have been here. So yeah, this is nice for me. So I just want to start by thanking Nicola and Chris and Ian for keeping the show on the road for the last couple and a half years. It's been, incredibly challenging. As we data access, there was a massive change in how all of that has happened and has enabled more access, but that has been on the back of a lot of work from a lot of people. So to thank them and their teams collectively, and also my team as well within the ESRC. I've got Matt and Rob here, and a whole load of other colleagues who've also been working incredibly hard to keep the infrastructure landscape and the rest of the research landscape going. So it's great to be able to say that and acknowledge that. So I'm going to talk about the economic and social data landscape. I'm conscious there are geographers in the room, so I define my terms, define what I mean by a landscape. And actually what I mean probably is more, I had to Google this actually this morning on the train. I mean more of a universe, and it's made up of various different galaxies. My galaxy is not the entirety of that universe. Obviously the economic and social data that ESRC funds is part of a much bigger universe, ONS. We've heard already for another very important part of that, and I think this work sits at the intersection between those two different galaxies or whatever. So I'm going to talk specifically about the kinds of investments we make at ESRC. There we go. So I'm going to talk, and it's going to be nested. I'm going to talk about the UKRI's plans around digital research infrastructure. I'm going to talk about our own data infrastructure strategy at ESRC. I'm going to talk about a programme of work that's supporting that strategy through the Future Data Services Review Programme. And then I'll finish by talking about the census support work that we're wanting to now support a fund for 2021-2022. Time one, make sure I don't go over. So that's my bit of the galaxy, but I'm also aware that there's other bits around that feed into it. So in terms of the major strategic developments, in 2018, that saw the creation of the KRI, so bringing together research councils with a whole set of objectives about helping to support science, helping to look at more interdisciplinary and more collaborative research across the different disciplines. That's only been in place for a couple of years. This year was the first time they've published a strategy, so that's now sitting behind a lot of the work that we do. ESRC has now published its own delivery plan that runs from 2022 to 25. That covers the current spending review period within government. So it's also worth remembering we are a government agency, so we are subject to the major strategic developments that happen within government R&D spend. So at the moment, government R&D spend has been increased. There is a big coupling, I think, helpful for our sector of the role of R&D spend and growth. Obviously, we're now at the point where, for the first time in a very long time, there was a spending review that actually gave us a budget for 3 years, not one. So for those of you, I think, that share the pain, managing an infrastructure budget where you're making commitments over very long periods on one-year funding cycles has been the challenge. I think there's no shying away from that. But being subject to that environment, there's a mini budget coming on Friday. So having got all our plans in place, thinking of the spending for the next 2 years, they may well be subject to change. So that was more of a kind of a plea for bear with us and remember that some of the decisions we have to take up because of our status as an agency of government. Another type of major strategic development that may well be on the horizon, I'm not going to say a huge amount about it today, but the implications of Brexit and its the UK's relationship with Horizon Europe. Some of you will be aware was previously our membership of the EU brought with it membership of Horizon Europe. As a country, UK is particularly successful in its success rates and was a net beneficiary of that funding resource. That has been caught up in the treaty negotiations around Northern Ireland and other aspects of Brexit. So we're subject to decisions being taken that are completely outside of our galaxy or even our universe that may well have big implications. Some of those implications, and there's been some statements made in July about the potential for Plan B, some of that may well be a very sudden, very large injection of money into this environment. Some of you, in this room may well be a beneficiary from that. But again, it's just giving you the context of within the areas that I have control over, I also have these other kind of satellites and meteors that sometimes land and move our gifts in different directions. The other thing I just to say is I'm going to talk about those kind of 4 elements of the circle. I'm not going to read out in vast detail everything about the new strategies or plans from each of these elements. This is more about giving you a kind of sketch of the universe, show you what the planets are, how they will interact, and hopefully if that sparks interest, you can ask me questions or go off and read about them later. So it's trying to give you an overview rather than lots and lots of detail. So as I mentioned, so UKI was formed in 2018. In the digital research infrastructure landscape, it has then given us both a mechanism to better coordinate the kind of investments we make in data infrastructure across the different communities. So that may well be about bringing the work that ESRC do around high performance computing and to sort of have better ways of connecting them. What does the social science community need for that? But it's also around us bringing our, we've got 50 years of experience as experts in data curation. Lots of other bits of the UKI landscape are at the very beginning of that journey. So we are able to help inform that. So by facilitating the means of that connection, it's also been incentivized, because there's also, there's a necessary, but also it's not sufficient. You have to give people the means to come together, but you also have to give people a reason. So through the digital research infrastructure strategy, and there's a link there to where that's been set out, there is money. So we've been working together to identify where those resources can be spent best. For example, we are co-sponsoring with MRC, the Medical Research Council, the DARE UK research programme around trusted research environments. So the work that's been done around that, yes, it's got it has a focus on health data research needs, but it also has the objectives that we want from a social science perspective being mapped out in that programme. So bringing together communities to try and deliver solutions in a way that hasn't happened before. I say that will give you the sense of the kinds of areas that they're trying to work in. This maps out, there's a lot of pillars in the UKI world, and there's often 5 of them. Sometimes 6, but often 5. So you'll see that there's 5 pillars in the UKI strategy, there's 5 pillars within this, there's 5 pillars in our strategy as well. So you can see the kinds of areas where it's looking at, but the important aspect of that, I think, is just to highlight, is it's not just about kit and physical infrastructure, it also has a strong recognition of people and the skills that data technicians and software engineers and professionals in that space bring to this environment. So bringing that up the fore. So if the DRI work is around the kind of connection and the kind of supporting collaboration across the councils, we've also within ESRC for our data landscape developed a new data infrastructure strategy. And this is about, for us, kind of calibrating and communicating what it is we want to achieve and the investments we make and making that a bit more transparent. But I'll just say what I mean by the ESRC data landscape. So the area that I and colleagues oversee in infrastructure broadly falls into the funding of surveys, primary data collection, largest of which many of you know or use as the Understanding Society study. We also then fund the services that support the data community to use those, so the research community to use data, UK Data Service, and obviously sensor support units that we're hearing about today. So that kind of falls into our world of data infrastructure. But obviously ESRC's investment in data is far broader than infrastructure. It also obviously funds the research using data. So we've got secondary data analysis initiative, we support fellowships, grants. We also support a large amount of investment in data skills and developing the next generation, and upskilling and continuing to invest in the continuing professional development around the data landscape as well. And obviously the investment in research methods where that's relevant in the data space as well. So as I mentioned, we have got a new data infrastructure strategy published this year that covers the next 5 years, 5 pillars within it. This sort of nests well into the strategies both for UKR as a whole and also the digital research infrastructure that we're looking to work with the rest of the community on. And as I said, this is about us providing a framework to make decisions about what we do or don't invest in. It helps give a bit of kind of, well, I say calibration and a bit of coherence to what we're doing. I think increasingly what you may, as research funding applicants or research data users, be increasingly challenged to demonstrate is, well, where does the work that you're doing contribute to delivery of this strategy? And a lot of it's about making sure that we're delivering the research data infrastructure and the assets that the whole community needs, rather than necessarily just focusing on a research project that one particular team might want to do. It's like what's the value add for the whole community. So a particular example of a piece of work we're doing at the moment to contribute to delivering that data strategy, and something which I think will touch the lives of everyone in this room, is our review of future data services. And this is about recognising that we fund across a whole range of investments some groundbreaking pieces of infrastructure to help researchers make use of data. But it's also recognising that the world has moved on and we need to continue evolving. And I think within the space of infrastructure, it's useful to think of yourself as, well, I try to think of ourselves as always being at the beginning or at most the middle of a journey. We've not reached the end of it, and technology will change, needs will change. So we need to be continually reviewing what we do and adjusting how we invest to make sure that we're making best use of the resources we're putting in and making sure that the community is properly well supported. So as Chris was talking about earlier, that radical change in how data access has shifted from physical locations into remote. We need to be making sure that all the services we're supporting are kind of moving in that direction and are anticipating the next big step in that space as well. So future data services, that kind of maps out where we're trying to deliver in that space. So the critical point of it is a lot of it's around collaboration and connectivity, and where I've kind of been speaking with or working with my team on this is it's not about thinking about the services we currently deliver and just sort of assessing do they meet needs or not. It's about turning it on its head and saying what does the research community need, and then let's map the services onto that. And given that it's all about what the research community needs, this is very heavily so they're the kind of 5 areas that we're looking at. But in terms of the areas that we're wanting to gather evidence on, it covers everything from discovery through to the ethics, the legal, public engagement, all aspects of data. The critical point is it's a consultation activity over a very extended period to make sure that we're getting the views of the community properly built into that. So we're at the evidence gathering phase at the moment. Then there'll be a phase around developing the options, and then into 2023 is when we'll actually be going out and commissioning these services, because there's a long timeline between establishing what it is that's needed and then actually funding that. And that evidence gathering, it's not a singular, here's one survey, here's one event. Actually, it's being developed around a recognition about all the different communities and different interests there are, and designing various activities. Things will be shared afterwards so you can see, but there's lots of activities going on. There's a survey that's about to be launched very soon, and Joe Screen will share the link with everybody who's here, and hopefully you can spread that via social media or just by traditional media. and bring in the views of everybody who uses social data in social research data into this space. So that just kind of gives you a sense that we've got three. It does look a proliferation. There are connections between these three areas. That's what that says. Fine. 5 minutes, brilliant. So the connections, the way I see it, is so the digital research infrastructure gives us this overarching, as I said, mechanism to bring things together, incentives to bring things together. And so, for example, in the work we're doing with future data services, we're looking at both how do we reconfigure our business as usual investment, but how do we also, what kind of opportunities can we identify for something really transformational, which we may then work with our DRI colleagues to fund. So it's not just about spending the current money differently or the same, but it's also about saying, well, is there additional things we need to be doing to be really moving on? So we've got that DRI in mechanism and ability to now do that and to work with other parts of the landscape to make sure that that investment is being well spent. Similarly, sorry, I didn't make notes on this. As I said, the work around that DRI is leading on high performance computing, the area actually where there's probably the most demand for that, or two areas where there's probably the most demand, but one is that around census data. We're now in, a lot of the plans, which I couldn't hear Jim's talk, but the plans that ONS are wanting to put in place around making research data, census data accessible will require a level of high performance computing power that we haven't necessarily previously had, but we are in a position now to sort of connect these dots and make sure those are working for us. So just finally talking about our plans for the 2021 and 22 census data, I see this as about the continuation of investments and the legacies that have been developed from previous census investments. So obviously the work we're going to hear about this afternoon is a live example of the legacy of previous investments ESRC has made into census data so that researchers can make use of it. But we're at that point where we want to be able to take stock of the investments we currently make with the UK Data Service, with the longitudinal support units, various other previous investments we've made, and scope out what the needs are this time round and going forward. And I think there's lots of different drivers and lots of different opportunities that are now opening up to us that maybe weren't around 10 years ago or certainly 20 years ago. And we don't want to just take a kind of cut paste business as usual, let's just do what we did last time. And much, the thread running through all of what I've said today, I hope, is around consultation and co-production. So my colleague Matt is in the audience here. I hope some of you had a chance to speak to him. Is leading our work at the moment, scoping out the kinds of needs that the community has for census data and how best we should design our research funding around that. And so the intention at the moment is to, and this hasn't been finalised, but the intention at the moment is to fund a kind of coordination post in the short term and then fund a larger programme of investment rolling out the next few financial years. So we've got that money kind of ring things to do that. So hopefully we'll hear lots of ideas today, but hopefully also feed in specifically around that piece of work and also feed in more broadly to our work on future data services. Sorry, and that's, when I'm talking about the plans for the census going forward, this is around infrastructure as opposed to research. But obviously the infrastructure should, well, the infrastructure should be driven by the research questions. So help us develop, well, I scope out the infrastructure needs for the specific research questions we're wanting to look at. And that's because it gives you a kind of sense of the kinds of range of activities or things that we might talk about as infrastructure to help kind of frame that. And yeah, that's my final.